Okay.
Okay, we're recording now. Gotcha. Hi, this is Terry Sutton from SavageWatch.com's Killer Chronicles with Michael Bouchard and Leanne Lazenby. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
It's Lazenby, but I'm
Lazenby.
Mosley.
Okay, Leanne Mosley. Okay. Well,
There you go.
We're not exactly scripted over here. We're kind of off the cuff here, and I
Okay.
guess that's why some people like us here, because we're not, we tell it like it is. And well, I guess we're here to talk about Amber Lazenby, your niece.
Correct.
You'd actually contacted me, sent me an email about this, about her death, saying that you believed that it was a homicide, and that you gave me an autopsy report where it said it was an undetermined death there. And I contacted Michael Bouchard, who's a true crime author on this video with us, who's also a police officer, and he also has a friend of his that is an archaeologist that looked at the autopsy. So they basically came out with their own, what conclusions, I guess you could say there. But before I get to Mike, and hopefully Roger will chime in here as well, I want to ask you a couple questions about your niece. First off, what was she like as a person?
She was fun loving. She was very caring. She just would help anybody.
Now, I know that you had told me that she obviously had some issues with addiction.
Correct.
That she was doing some prostitution, if I'm correct.
Yes.
And she was a victim. You would tell me that you believe that she was a victim of abuse earlier in her life, and as well as she was abandoned.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Her biological mother had left her and her sister. Her sister Sierra was about 6 months year old, and Amber was about 6 years old. Her mother did speed a lot. She had met somebody on the internet and just up and took off.
Wow.
And left my brother to raise them. My brother was prescribed pills, and he would crush them up and he would snort them. And he would take, speeders, and she would do the same.
So she picked up the behavior.
Yes.
Did Amber have any contact with her biological mother the last couple of years of her life, or was it sporadic?
Nope.
No contact whatsoever.
Nope. She had nothing to say to her mother. She didn't care one thing about her mother. Her mother did not even come into the picture until somebody had contacted her and told her that she was deceased.
And she thought it was a joke.
And she thought it was a joke.
That's pretty sad. Unfortunately, I guess, Mike, you probably come across that quite a bit in your dealings as a police officer. Leanne, you also told me that you believe she may have been sexually abused, which obviously is a huge impact and will cause somebody to either go into addiction or make their addiction worse while they try to deal with those traumas. Correct.
I am the fifth of 6 children. Amber's father is the 6th of the 6 children. The 5 of us kept our children away from my dad. Now my dad would watch Amber, and he would also watch Sierra along with his new wife. I believe he molested Amber. Now Sierra swears up and down, well, they both have swore that he never touched them. But if my dad did touch Amber, she went to her grave with that secret.
Okay.
Sierra, her sister, who will be 19 in next month, she swears that my dad never touched her.
But your dad had a history of doing things like that.
He molested all 3 of my sisters and myself, and also my brother.
Wow. So obviously, if Amber and her sister were in the care of this individual, there's a very likely possibility that this could have happened.
Yes.
Okay. Mike, you would agree with that sentiment, being a police officer?
I mean that's common with substance abuse and all of that type of stuff. It's not an uncommon factor in it. You know, and my understanding of her, you know, as a teenager and with her father, and the narcotics and stuff like that. I mean, I can see, you know, how she got into the life that she was in. Um, and it's unfortunately at 24 passing away from, well, you know, the autopsy reports put it as undetermined. However, I have a problem with that because, like I said, I looked at it, and you know, I work in a large inner city, so overdoses and people, you know, dying from drug addiction, you know, is an everyday occurrence for me. So I'm familiar with some of the patterns with that. But there were distinctive factors in the autopsy report itself that leads one away from believing that it wasn't a homicide. Now, Roger Moeller, who is a friend of mine been a friend of mine for a long time, also edits medical journals, and he's familiar with you know, autopsies and reports and stuff like that. So we both looked at it independently before we even talked about it. I wrote some notes down, he wrote some notes down, and our conclusions were almost identical. You know, one, the report was exceptionally short. It shouldn't be that short. Um, it didn't specifically identify the cause of death, which it should have, but it didn't. It seemed to factor out the laceration to the forehead, the C-spine injury, and the term that they used, strangulation or asphyxiation. So if there was that type of laceration to the head, it would have bled profusely.
But now, how that did it say how bad that cut was on her head?
There was a measurement in it, and it was probably a couple inches or larger. However, that type of injury to the forehead, because there's so many vessels up there, it bleeds like you draining a sponge.
Okay,
but that's the medical examiner put no notification of any type of blood being in the vehicle, which brought us both to the conclusion that, okay, if that injury occurred and the wound was a fresh wound, it wasn't old, it wasn't healing, that the injury would have been outside of the vehicle. Then you go to the asphyxiation. Okay, when most people pass away from a drug addiction, the body automatically attempts to, you know, get rid of the poison or toxic chemicals in the body. So they puke, vomit.
Okay.
No note of any vomit in her esophagus. Okay, so that leads us to strangulation. Now the C-spine is low; it's down here, right where a set of hands would go. The problem is the medical examiner didn't provide any photos of whether it was a vertical break or a twist. But if you put those three factors together, it was more than likely she was struck in the forehead. The strangulation, probably somebody grabbed her around the neck, and that's probably what occurred, because that's the only way you're going to snap. That bone is way down here. I mean, to snap that, you know, you have to have some force. So that wasn't from a person just falling. If a person just fell, you wouldn't get that type of neck injury, you know. There were a lot of things missing in the reports. Plus, Roger noted that there was a lot of misspelling of medical terminology in the reports. So we're wondering if the medical examiner actually wrote that report, or if it was somebody working for him that may have written it. We don't have an initial police report to tell us, you know, what the crime scene looked like. Doesn't, give us any information about people that may have been in the area. So based on what we have just in the autopsy report, now they make a big deal about this front seat being pushed over her. However, the position her body was in, where the seat made contact, there were no bruises. So that had nothing to do with the as part of an injury. So the most explainable conclusion at this point was that the assault, because that's what it was, and I don't see why that wasn't put in the report. I mean, that just, that doesn't make sense to us, was that she was injured outside the car, probably passed away outside the car, because if she was in the car and her heart was still pumping, the blood would have still kept coming out. But there's no indication that there was blood anywhere in the car. So that means that she was deceased before she got into the car. If she was deceased for, let's say, under an hour, her body would still be flexible. So it could have gotten to that position. And then the medical examiner says that the lividity or the rigor mortis fit the position she was in. Well, it would have had to, because if she hadn't, had rigor mortis before she went into the car, it would have normally taken over after she got in the car. I think the seat was just put over her to hide the body, to be honest with you. We know the car wasn't a functioning car. It was used for narcotics and prostitution. And maybe in this case, it was just used to hide somebody, But now, does she have anybody that didn't like her? Anybody she owed money to? Do we know any of this?
I want to say she probably owed somebody some money.
Okay.
Probably one of the dealers.
Because I mean, like I said, to get hit upside the, hit in the forehead and then strangled, that's personal. when you get if you hit somebody in the head, that's one thing. But if you strangle a person, that's personal. So that's either somebody that she owed money to that was PO'd that he didn't get it.
Right.
Or somebody that you knew in a different type of relationship that got PO'd because of whatever reason. So, there were a lot of unusual things about that. And like I said, that was a short report. That was like a page and an eighth. I mean, a normal report is probably 3, 4, 5 pages long.
Mike, what did you think about the toxicology report? The amount of cocaine in that system, was that enough to kill her? Or
Well, a normal person, it could have killed her.
Okay.
However, because she had an addiction problem for such a long time, her body was used to larger amounts of illicit drugs. So it may not have appeared her like it would a normal person. But then again, we go back to if it was a drug overdose, most people have a drug overdose will throw up, but yet there's no vomit in her esophagus or in the car, just like there's no blood in the car. So the injuries couldn't have happened in the car. I mean, and I'm going, if the ME accurately reported it. I mean, I don't see why, if there was a pool of blood in the car, I mean, under normal circumstances, you'd put their, pool of blood in the car, vomit in the car, urine in the car, but there was none of that. So that couldn't have happened in the car. That's an issue I'm having with that. The car seems like it was where they put the body. So, and we don't have like I said, we don't have a police report.
Now, how hard will it be to get a police report from them?
Well, that depends. Depends on the police department. I mean, some, see, there's two types of reports I think we're dealing with here. One is an initial report. That's the cop that goes to the scene, okay, this is what I found. And it should have, was there blood in the car, any of this, anybody he spoke to.
Okay.
That report would be filed. A copy of that would go to the detective bureau. That would be they would hold that file, but they would do an additional case jacket for that. So you actually have two different files. Now, the first one you should be able to get because they don't have any suspects and nobody's being charged, so there's no adjudication going on. You should be able to get that file. And that file should kind of give you an idea of, you know, what the scene was like when they got, how, you know, how did the police find out about this? Who informed them? You know, what did the crime scene around the car look like, if there was a crime scene? You know, these are things that are important things that, I mean, that you should know. As a family member, you should know.
They've been pretty quiet about everything.
The
Well,
only thing they said that they found was a crack pipe.
yeah, but you know what? People with drug addiction have it, you know, they're going to have that on them anyway. But
Yeah.
that doesn't explain the cut in her forehead and the
Right.
snapped cervical.
Now, see, they
mean-
know nothing about that.
Well, you see, and I personally, if I was there, I would have a big issue with that because
Geez.
that injury was probably, those two injuries are probably what caused the death, not a drug overdose.
Right.
And,
Yeah, when I
and
fir-
again, the toxicology report wasn't a full toxicology report. You didn't get a full one. I mean, you know, the full ones have a lot of different things in it, alcohol,